when he told me that the selfie, like almost single-handedly changed the number of people who were coming in for nose jobs and
Lip enhancements,
because you're trying to, I don't even know, that's just so insane. And during the break, actually, we were talking about how Beverly Hills, like, it is, I mean, it's the hub of plastic surgery, and just the number of people who are coming in trying to look flawless, wrinkle-free, perfect lips, forehead reduction or whatever, enhancement. And you said something so interesting. Can you share that?
So I was just saying that, like, so some of these people, one of the reasons they're doing that is because, as you can imagine, they sort of, earn or make a career of being in the spotlight, one way or the other. So whether that's a true sort of top-end celebrity like a Hollywood actress, or like a news anchorwoman or somebody. But jokes aside, so the thing is, if that's an important part of your persona that you're portraying to society on a daily basis, it makes sense to have it in its sort of tip-top condition. And so in those sort of societies, and we've got a little bit of that even in South Africa where I train, but I mean it's more in Europe and the US and so on. Just the same way you've got lawyers and retainers and architects and retainers if you're a developer. Some of these people have their plastic surgeons on a retainer, so that so because they're coming in so often, that it just makes sense to sort of have somebody who's like your person, your go-to person, doing your thing whenever you need it.
Is that? I mean, I don't know. Is that ethical? Is that, or I mean, I know we're getting into like a mucky grounds here, but is that okay for someone to be on retainer to keep changing and?
And this, no, it's a good question. It's a good question. I mean, I don't know of any medical ethics rules that are directly against that. The bottom line in most of medicine and most of what we do procedure-wise, I think you've heard of informed consent. So at the end of the day, as long as you can prove that your patient is asking for and is agreeing to a procedure, that they're of sound mind when they make that decision. Then by and large, as long as there's no obvious harm being done, the rest is kind of left to, it's sort of is a buyer-seller type of arrangement. Now of course, when it comes to healthcare, when it comes to medicine, I think doctors should always look at, could this harm the patient either now or later, or anyone around them, because those are important factors. But this is how a lot of extreme procedures, a lot of extreme surgery gets done in that sort of a context.
So in your experience, do you find that the number of people who have had plastic surgery, and this is aesthetics, the cosmetic surgery, that that at some point down the line that there is some element of regret? Or in general, are people, happy about their decisions?
Again, good question. I think if I'd approach it from another angle, I think that when I've looked at some of the people I respect the most in plastic surgery, so surgeons and mentors and so on, when I look at their outcomes, and when I've heard their patients speaking about the work that was done or that type of thing, on average, or more often, you have satisfied patients, happy, comfortable with what was discussed and what was delivered, and outcomes and so on. On the other hand, I find it's common to have patients who are not so happy with what was done, in two broad areas. One is where the decision to have the thing done was rushed into. Very quick, very sort of, impulsive, and sometimes very hard sold. Like you got to do it today. It's a deal. It's cheap. It's quick. It's easy. That kind of thing. Or alternatively, where somebody asks for something, a patient comes in and says, for example, want my breasts enhanced or something, and they ask for a certain size or a certain look, and for example, a lot of women who do that are in their 20s. And what they're asking for might be socially or culturally acceptable for just then, for that decade, but 2 decades down the line, things have changed, you know, and suddenly you don't want to look, you know, a certain way. You don't want your you know, you don't want your bust to be that sort of, you know, attention grabbing, you know, and that sort of thing. So it's when it's I think when you have dissatisfied patients, it tends to be one of those two sort of groups. One is sort of the rushing into it, and the other is sort of is being very focused on a certain look, but not thinking about it long term, and sort of, you know, how will I change? How will I age, and, you know, will I always want to look this way?
Right. So, I mean, we've talked about breast enhancement, and maybe lips as well, nose jobs, and those are the sort of socially acceptable cosmetic plastic surgeries out there. But then there are some really wild ones that we've seen. Whether it's like horns, you know, people sort of putting their tongues that have been split into two, like really different, really alternative forms of plastic surgery. How much of that is ongoing, and is that like, are most surgeons okay with that, or do they at some point think, I know this is about self-expression, but this is a lot?
You know, like any other field, I think there's a commercial aspect to plastic surgery, as you can imagine, and when you're doing things like that, I mean, obviously, I'm assuming there's going to be significant money involved in getting this done. So maybe that's one of the incentives to get certain surgeons to do those things. I would like to say that by and large, the vast majority of surgeons would shy away from being involved with something like that, because
like splitting tongue.
Yes, and if you look at it, if you try to, and I've tried to look at this, you know, from a personal research point of view. I've tried to look at who does these and where do they get done and how does it happen, and it's interesting. It's very difficult to find any sort of tangible information. So what does that mean? That means that if obviously there are surgeons doing these things, but I think they try to distance themselves from it. I know that some surgeons, when they're doing certain procedures, especially extreme procedures, I've even seen disclaimers, legal disclaimers. You know, so meaning I'll do something for you, but I mean, but you will never be able to use my name or my connection to you. You know, things like that. Now, I'm not aware of anyone doing things like that in Kenya as yet, and let's hope it stays that way. But what I'm trying to get at is that I think that's where the lines definitely blur, in the sense that you've got people wanting these extreme things, you've got people maybe willing to offer them for financial gain, you know, the commercial side of it. But on the other hand, the fact that you don't find a doctor 90210 or somebody saying, yes, I put horns on that guy. That just shows you that most likely this firstly isn't very mainstream, and I think you wouldn't want to tarnish your entire reputation being linked to some of these sort of, you know, very extreme art forms, if you want to call it that, because in some ways it is sort of expressing an artistic, or, you know,
which is just why, I mean, it's insane. So, but where's the line? Where do you then draw the line between someone who wants to split their tongue and someone who wants to change their nose? Ultimately, aren't you, I know one is more socially acceptable and we'll look at the nose and be like, but where do you draw the line? Is that okay? Is it when ribs are taken out so that your waist is smaller? Is it how do you start to draw that line? Because and it feels like maybe even society has a hand in pushing those.
So I think some of the things being asked for are being driven by, you know, social norms and mores that are changing and that are ever changing. I mean, throughout human history. But on the other hand, I think when it comes to where do you draw the line? I think that eventually comes down to the individual, and by the individual I mean both the individual patient who's requesting ABC, you know. And on my side, the individual doctor who then gets to choose what am I comfortable with. Now let me use another example that is completely unrelated, but is relevant. I mean, for example, there are doctors in countries where abortion is absolutely legal, okay, or in states where it's legal, and you know, and who still say, this is against my beliefs, and I don't want to do it. And so there's always room for you to say, well, I don't think that's safe, or I don't want to do this for whichever reason, whether it's religious or you know, based on your morals and principles. And but to go broader than that, I would say one of the basic tenets of the medical profession is first do no harm. Okay, it's one of the it dates back to the Hippocratic Oath, and so when somebody asks for something extreme, I will look at it and say, look, if it is like a scar that is really disfiguring and is affecting their lives and still has a hardly a 50-50 chance of improving, I'd go through the whole the motions in terms of explaining what I can offer and the fact that it may not even do very much, but if you still want to give it a try, we can try. Okay, why? Because I think there's some benefit that could be achieved. Okay, and at the worst, maybe we end up where we started, but no better. On the other hand, if you come in and ask for something where I'm almost 99% sure that we're going to do you some harm. Now, whether that is physically, societally, or in terms of changing the way, disfiguring you in a way that I think, nobody is going to be able to properly fix again. Then I would like to think that, again, 99% of plastic surgeons are going to say, that's where I draw the line. I'm not going to do that because it's not safe. It's not right. And even if what you're asking for is from a bit of a quirk or there's a whole spectrum from being a bit quirky to being to mental illness. But wherever you fall on that sort of line, at the end of the day, it does become our duty to say, maybe let's try and find you help in other ways.
Do you find that there's more women than men who are looking for some kind of cosmetic surgery?
I think so. Yes, I still think that society is skewed a bit that way. The numbers are changing, though. The percentages are changing.
Okay.
A few reasons for that. One of the reasons why women probably will always seek cosmetic surgery more is because society firstly kind of puts that expectation upon them.
And social pressures.
Yes, and it's sort of there consistently from sort of puberty and teenage right up into sort of what we would consider the elderly, after 65. So unfortunately women, and I think we underestimate this, but there is a lot of societal pressure on them to look a certain way and appear all fresh and made up and youthful.
Even at 70 you want to look like a 20.
Exactly. And so much so that now that women who drive this themselves sometimes have lost track of the fact that they are part of that machine. But on the other hand, you've got society itself changing, healthcare and our sort of socioeconomic status around the world improving, okay, and people living longer. Now, if we're living longer, we're living longer, we're working longer, okay, and therefore we're being competitive or needing to be competitive longer, okay, and if you look at that just very judgmentally, it immediately explains why, for example, more men are coming in their 50s or in their late 40s and saying, I want something improved, like the skin on my neck's a little bit loose, so I'd want my face looking a little bit firmer, and I don't want to look like an older person. And as soon 2 minutes into the consultation, and you immediately begin to realize it's because commonly today, men about that age are now competing with younger men who are coming into the marketplace in their mid-20s and having to go head to head. So and we're more in the media spotlight. We're more on TV, on camera, etc. Giving presentations on Instagram, and you don't want this perception of you being sort of washed out to be what carries the day. So those kind of aspects are pushing more and more men to seek certain things. And that can sort of vary head to toe, just like with women. But we do find a lot of men coming in wanting facial rejuvenation and that sort of thing.
Right.
But by and large, it's like I said, women will it'll still be skewed to women, and I think there's also biological reasons for that.
What do you mean?
In the sense that if you look at how women's bodies change over their lifetime, there is much more dramatic, or there's much more room for dramatic change than there is in the average man's body over a lifetime. Now, obviously, both men and women can gain weight dramatically or lose it and that sort of thing. Okay, I mean, we're talking about the extremes. But on the other hand, I mean, if you look at an average woman who has, for example, maybe her first child in her mid-20s or 30s, and then goes on to complete her family in her, let's say, late 30s or 40s, but she gets left with baggage.
Right.
Okay.
Baggage.
Changes that are natural, that are completely biologically normal.
But still, again, don't stick to that those social constructs around.
And for example, today is a working woman who just because she's had her family doesn't have to stop her life and say, I'm just going to sit at home and take care of the kids. I mean, that's now becoming a more and more foreign concept as we go into, if you look at modern society. So it's not surprising that one of the most commonly sought after procedures in cosmetics is the fondly sort of termed mummy makeover.
Oh.
Which basically refers to two or more procedures that try to put women back or turn back the clock a bit. Now the two commonest ones would be something to do with the breasts, like a lift or reduction, and a tummy tuck or liposuction, something like that. Something that sort of shapes you back into a pre-pregnant state.
I don't know. I mean, I know we've run out of time and we have to end the show, but there's some, I mean, again, I think to each their own, and if it makes you happy, who's anyone to tell you what to do? But there's something a little unsettling about mummy makeover, like trying to go back to before a child when, think about your life is going to be that way. I mean, your body might look like that, but forever you're changed by your children and, having children. And I don't know, I'm a little on the fence about that.
I think I could talk you into it because I'll tell you, it's probably one of one of my favorite sort of cosmetic procedures. And not just from the aesthetic point of view, how it makes you look, but actually because a lot of these women, when they come back, and there is a reconstructive element to it, you'll find they do feel a lot better. But if you look at how they carry themselves, and if you look at how much more confident they are, and how much sort of more invigorated they are, and how they're going about their lives, it suddenly you begin to realize it's not about it. Like people have this perception that it's about what they look like naked. It's not. It's actually about how they're going to look like in their work clothes, and how they're going to go about their lives, and how they feel about themselves, and how they feel they look to society. It immediately sort of elevates their sort of.
And that's the part where I feel like, to each their own. If it makes you happy, why do you care? But then I still get frustrated about society and wanting to shove us into a certain kind of box. But again, it's like, it's both ways. I totally get it. I do. I just also, I'm like, I don't know. It's like almost going back to the selfie. Like, why are we trying so hard to fit into a mold? But I think this is a conversation that we could get on. I mean, I go on and on and on about. And there's so many different things. At this rate, I feel like next time I probably should come into your practice and see, like, what does it actually look like? What are the questions that you ask? Just to understand it even better. You are absolutely welcome, and as a little bit of advice to people listening to this, I think that what you just alluded to is the most important part about seeking a consult or seeking advice. One is make sure you're getting proper medically verified information, and we as practitioners should be pointing you in the right directions. I try very hard to do that. And number two is ask questions, because the truth is that the only silly questions are the ones that are left unasked. Okay, and if you don't ask enough questions, then that's how sometimes you can end up, being either hamstrung into a procedure that you didn't quite want to. You're not quite sure of the outcomes. You'll end up with regretting, having complications, etc., etc. So those are probably the most important take-home messages about cosmetic surgery. All right. Well, thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you for allowing me to ask the questions and bring me into your world a little bit more. All right,
Thanks
ladies and gents. Most welcome, Dr. Michael. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. We'll be back same time, same place. For now, have a great rest of the day, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye, everybody.